And finally, they do this brief like at the end of airborne school, and they're like, if anybody wants to go to Ranger Regiment, just show up here. And I show up, and he's going around. He's like, write your name, all this different kind of stuff. There wasn't a lot of people there. There was only like 20 of us in there. And I remember these two kids that I'd been basic training with, and there was one that this guy was hard charging, right? Like he was airborne ranger all the way. He would stay up like at night, shining his boots. He's like, in Ranger Regiment, you have to have the best boots. Like they got to be like class, And, he knew the Ranger creed, like all this different kind of stuff. And he wasn't at the brief. I was like, what in the hell? Like, and I can't remember the guy's name. You never remember the losers' names. And happened to run out of him after. Oh, well, hold on real quick. So we're going through the brief, and he looks at this list, the RIP cadre. He's standing there, the recruiter. He's standing there. He goes, Mike Burke. He goes, who's Mike Burke? And I'm like, right here. He's like, I almost don't want to let you come because of how much you've annoyed me and how many notes you've led me. And I'm like, listen, I want to be a Ranger, Sergeant, and nothing's going to stop me. He kind of like looked at me like, all right, fine, whatever. He's like, whatever, I don't care. He's like, you'll probably get washed out anyway. So, but anyway, so we leave that brief. And I remember we're walking by because we're like where the brief was, there was the holdover barracks or like the dropout barracks and stuff like that. We walk by and we see that kid. It's me and my other buddy that wanted to be, there's three of us who were like core group. We were going to be Rangers. And we see him and we're like, hey, what the hell are you doing over here? Like, did you get hurt or something like that? Because I think at that point we'd done like swingline trainer. We'd done a bunch of stuff and guys were getting hurt doing that stuff. We hadn't jumped out of the plane yet. And anyway, he's like, no, he's just like, nah. He's like, I don't want to do this. It's too hard. I'm like, dude, we haven't even done anything yet. He's like, yeah. He's like, I just hear that they like kick your ass and it's really hard. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the fucking idea. And like, we've been talking about this for, I don't know, how long are you at this point? Like 15 weeks, like this is what we've all been talking about like this whole time. And I just remember like, I don't want to sit there and say like I had another epiphany moment, but I do remember thinking like, wow, man, I wonder how many people self-select just because they get in their heads. Because you got all these rumors about stuff like, if you're in Ranger Regiment, you can't be married. If you're in Ranger Regiment, you're never going to be home. If you're in Ranger Regiment, like, all this different, you'll never eat, they only feed you like one meal a day, like there's all these stupid flipping rumors, and they're just rumors, but they actually probably exist for a reason because those people that let that dissuade them are probably not the people we want anyway. Well, actually, they're definitely not the people that we want, because the people we want are the people that lean into discomfort or fear or, the unknown. Those are the kind of people that are successful in special operations specifically. But anyway, so, they come and, this story's been told a million times by a million different people, but, you get out you graduate airborne school, you're all excited. Everybody's so freaking excited. You're now an airborne, soldier. Everybody's going to their first assignments, all this different kind of stuff. People's family are there. It's just this amazing thing. And I remember actually my mom and my grandma, they came down. It was really, really cool to have them there for my graduation. And then you're like, fuck, it's not over for me. And you don't know if you got the weekend off. You have no idea. They tell you do, but you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right?
They'll take it all away.
Yeah, right. But you're supposed to have the weekend off. But anyway, so you do the formation. You got all your gear. You got your duffel bags and RIP cadre. Just they come out. They step off the 5-ton in like a Humvee or whatever it was, and you're just like, oh my god, look at these fucking dudes, man. Just spit starched uniforms, freaking boots that are just glass and that black beret. And you're just like, holy shit, these guys are badasses, right? And they look mean. and what's funny is my RIP cadre, they're actually still to this day, and many people will back me up on this. They're like, the meanest looking motherfuckers. Like, you know, one of them was this guy Blum, and he's still like, if I saw him today, I'd still be like, shit, don't hurt me, dude. You're like, he's just, and that guy, man, he would run with his dip in. But anyway, so, you know, they step off and they're like, hey, you know, throw one duffel bag on the back of the 5-ton and then, you know, put on the rest of your shit. And I don't really know why, but I'd kind of been smart. I hadn't bought a bunch of shit, but I do remember guys like had bought, and like guys had like suitcases and shit like this, and they had all these different, you know, they'd bought all kinds of different stuff in airborne school. And I just remember kind of like looking around like, holy shit, like they're gonna have to carry all this stuff. And you just start running and you run up the road. It's not far. I don't know how far it is. Maybe it's 2 miles. It's probably less than 2 miles. I think it's not very far.
Seems like a turn.
Yeah, right. You don't know, you know. And so we run, you know, we start running and dudes are dropping shit. And I remember one guy like took his suitcase, like threw it in the woods, and then they made him go get it. They're like, you're not littering on post, you know. Like,
I'll go back and get it.
Yeah, that was his thought process. I didn't really blame him, man. I was like, yeah, I probably would have done the same shit. You know, because it sucked, you know. And you get up there and, you know, you ground all your gear, you put it in formation. I think the first sergeant, you know, comes out and kind of reads you the riot act and like, hey, you know, this is going to be hard. This is going to be tough. We're going to separate the men from the boys, you know, that kind of standard speech, you know, and you're like, okay, what the hell? It did. It really did because, and the reason it pumped me up is because so far there was nothing that like, I was like, man, this is fucking tough. I mean, it was difficult, but it wasn't tough. There was no moments in basic training or airborne school I was like, I don't know if I can fucking do this. Like, I don't know if I can, you know, keep on going. Like, there was never a moment like that. So I was like, okay, you know, this is going to be the test. And I'm like, what's this weekend got in store for you? You know, and they're not telling you anything. You know, they're not telling you, hey, we're just going to do this, and then you're going to have the weekend off. You know, so you're just going through, you know, and they smoked us, but it wasn't really anything substantial, you know. And then they're like, okay, you know, we're going to file you in one at a time. And I don't remember what they filed us in for. I think it was like room assignment or something like that. And then they get us back out in formation. And then they make us like get in this big conference room and we're filling out paperwork. We're doing all this different stuff. And I don't know, in a moment of like lapse, I couldn't remember my social security number. Like, I have no idea, you know, and I'm like panicking, like, fuck, what's my, you know, you got to fill out this like mail card, probably is what it was. Like, and I can't remember my and I know my social security card. I couldn't, I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm already going to get kicked out. Like, I haven't even done anything. And I go up there and I'm like, Sergeant, he's like, what do you want? I was like, I can't remember my social security number. And he's like, how many times have you said your social security number over the last like 15 weeks? And I was like, a fucking lot. But I don't know. I just can't fucking remember it. And he's like, well, it's going to cost you. And I was like, oh my God, what's it going to cost me? And like, you know, he smoked the shit out of me for like, you know, 10 minutes. I was like, okay, whatever. So I got my social security number and, you know, it was fine. And, you know, we put our shit in our rooms. They got us, you know, they kind of fucked with us a little bit. And then they're like, all right, everybody out in the hallway. So we get out in the hallway and they're like, all right, time is now. You have to be back here Sunday at this time. Don't drink. Don't go, you know, avoid these areas, you know, and the real work starts on Sunday. Get the fuck out of here. And I'm like, holy shit. So, you know, and I went and spent the weekend with my grandma and my mom, and it was awesome. And it was kind of, I don't want to say like I was down, but I was definitely like, because, you know, they'd flown down there. And that was a big thing for my parents, you know, for my grandma. My grandma never travels. And my mom, it was a big deal, you know. And I was like, it kind of messed with me that, like, they potentially could be down here all weekend and they're not going to see me again. You know, they appeared in my airborne wings, but they're not going to see me again. So I was like, you know, but it was fine. You know, we had a great weekend and everything else. Took them to the airport and, you know, reported on Sunday to where I needed to go. And it started. And it fucking started, man. And I will tell you what, it was intense. It was, you know, not only physically, but mentally too, because, you know, some guys will, you know, they'll talk about like when people are really sucking or people are quitting, they'll draw motivation from that. And, I didn't learn this until later on, but I'm not one of those people. When I see people really hurting, like really, really suffering and quitting, it like kind of takes my energy as well. And I realize it's because like I intrinsically care about people. Like even if they're pieces of shit, I still care about people. But and I'm just watching people quit, just left and right, and people just hurting and people crying, like literally crying, like I don't think I can do this. And I'm like, fuck, man, like, and I was hurting too, it was not fun. It was not a cakewalk, and it was nonstop, and it was, you're stressed out the whole time because you don't want to fuck up, and there's things you have to do right. You can't just fuck your way through it. You got to do land nav. You got to do all this different kind of stuff, and and you got rip cadre that, because I was a good runner, and they look at your scores, and they're like, okay, you're a front road guard, okay, and being the front road guard is always the worst because you're the one that has to always catch up, and you got to stay ahead. And I just remember, we take off this was the very first run, and this guy that I was telling you about, Blum, he right before we're getting ready to start, he puts in, a full bottom lipper dip. I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then we take off on this run, and this dude, every time I turn my head, he's on my heels. He's like, get up there, road guard. And the dude's not even breathing. I swear to God, he's not even breathing. He's got a giant dip in. And I'm like, how is this fucking possible? This is not possible. There's just no way this can happen. I am a good runner. I'm running sub 12s. Okay. Well, right at 12s. Come on, let's not exaggerate here. Yeah. Well, I also weighed $130, so I weighed nothing, so I run like the wind. And I just, it worked. It worked. It made me second guess myself if I had what it took, because I'm like, I am busting my ass running. And this dude has got a dip in, and he's acting like this is a warm up for him. We do this run and we come back, and I'm like, whew, okay, all right, and I don't want to sit there and say I was thinking about quitting during the run, but I was definitely like, this is the first morning. This is the start of everything. I'm like, oh my God. But it was fun. We had a lot of fun. They did a lot of training.
That lasted right back in
Yes.
98.
Yeah. So in 98, it was 3 weeks. But the first, I don't know if I remember right. I want to say the first 2 weeks is nonstop. Okay. It's just, nonstop fucking with you, all this different kind of stuff. You're doing events, you got critical events. You got to do land nav. You got to do ruck marches, all this different kind of stuff. And then you actually have the weekend off in between the second and the third week. So, and it was awesome. It was absolute suck fest. It sucked. I was challenged in ways that I never, ever thought I'd be challenged. I watched so many guys quit, just left and right. My buddy, the other buddy that I was telling you about, yeah, he was like, I'm fucking done, dude. Let's fuck this shit, and I'm like, holy shit. And I want to say, don't fact check me on this, but I want to say we had about 80 people in my rep class, okay? And when we finished that second 2 weeks, we had roughly right around 20, okay? Maybe a little bit more. It wasn't very many of us. And I remember standing there the last formation on the Friday, and they told us, they're like, hey, we got some stuff we got to do today. Most of it's recovery stuff. And then you guys are going to have the weekends off, okay? I remember too, they were like, after dinner chow, you're gonna have the weekend off. I'm like, why the fuck are we going to dinner chow? Because dinner chow was always a pain in the ass too, because you had to eat, it was like basic training, you had to eat quick, but you also were eating with all the other Rangers, from the battalions, and they're just mean. Yeah, you are fucking pond scum. So not only are you having to eat fast, but you also feel like you're the scum of the earth at the same time. You're like, ugh. But I do remember that I was like, man, this chow hall's way better than the freaking one of the basic training. Goddamn, this is good. I'm gonna have to come back here someday. Anyway, but I do remember standing the final formation, right after chow, and looking, around, and I'm like, holy shit. Dude, I'm still standing here. I made it through this. And these guys that like, because you start to look up to your peers, And I remember there was a guy that was in my RIP class that he'd been prior service. I don't recall what. I don't know. Maybe he was a Marine. Maybe he was in the Army or something like that. He was really squared away too, and he's a beefcake, And we all looked up to him, and he quit. And I'm like, Jesus, like if that guy quit, like what in the hell chances do I have, And I just remember standing there and I'm like, the first time, I can literally honestly say the first time in my life, I had pride. I was like, I did this. Like, holy shit, And the third week, they kind of told us, like, third week's still going to suck, but you guys have made it through the crucible. You still got some tests you got to do, like Ranger history tests, Blue Book standards, all this different kind of stuff. But for the most part, the third week, you've made it. Now it's yours to lose, so to speak, And so it was like the first time I ever can say that I really felt pride. Like I'd earned something. I'd earned my spot to stand in that formation. It's not that I didn't feel it at the blue cord ceremony after basic training. I did, but I mean, who really quit basic training and who really quit airborne school? There's a few people, but and some people get hurt along the way, but that shit's going to happen no matter what. That's not a decider, for anything. And I remember I called my parents, and they hadn't heard from me in a couple weeks and everything else. And my mom, she had obviously conveyed to my dad that like I was super nervous, like it was going to be hard, and I was stressed out about it. And I just remember they called and they're like, "Well," and I'm like, "I made it. I still got the 1 week left, but I made it through the hard part." And I just remembered like their pride, like amplifying through the phone, like it got to me, man. And I was like, and I felt, to draw back, like I felt like what I imagined my uncle had felt when everybody was staring at him. And I hadn't earned my black beret yet. I wasn't wearing it yet, but the one step closer, right? So anyway, so it was like a huge moment for me, and it also gave me confidence that like, hey, if I can do this, okay, then I can do other things. I've set a new normal, and this is something I talk to my kids about all the time, is prior to that 3 months, what was my normal? What was my hardest moment in life, physically and mentally and everything else? Sure, a lot of the trauma and stuff I'd been through, and I'd done some physical stuff, I was on track team. I played football a little bit. I was not an athlete. I just said I played, okay? Just to be clear, okay? I didn't say I was a fucking athlete. I just said I played. But I really was like, I've created a new normal. I can now, what can I do? What am I actually capable of? All these other people fell off and self-selected and weren't able to do what I just did. And we came back the third week, and I remember it was like the first time I felt a change. Like I was different. I felt different. I felt like a soldier. I felt like I was going to be a Ranger. And anyway, so that third week, it was not hard. I've always been good at like tests and memorizing, and I found it incredibly intriguing. And there was a little bit of fuckery, and some stuff, and there was some technical stuff we had to do too, but it wasn't really challenging. And then General McChrystal, he presided over the Ranger graduation. The RIP graduation. It was RIP at the time. At the National Ranger Memorial, that's over at Fort Benning, which is just amazing to begin with as well. And put that scroll on and put that beret on, and I'd have fought a fucking dragon. Now go to a Marine Corps.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
We all remember the dragon.
Dude.
We all remember the dragon.
Absolutely. Dude. Yeah. And I always tell people that with like boot camp, dude, you were God's gift to Earth. Oh, yeah. The indoctrination of the Marine Corps boot camp, because people are like, oh, boot camp. I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, because I've talked to a lot of, obviously I have tons of friends now in Army. Yeah, absolutely. And Army is just different with your guys' boot camp.
There's not like this huge, so you have at the end of basic, I don't even remember what they call it, but basically it's like the 12-miler out of the field. Mm-hmm. That's like the crucible event. And don't get me wrong, it's
tough. Yeah,
but it's not Like what the Marine Corps does.
Yeah, the Marine Corps breaks you down like mentally. Yes. Like, are you going to make it through boot camp? And everyone's like, are we surviving boot camp? You know, like that's truly.
Are you going to kill me?
Yeah. Like, oh my god, you know. And some people do recycle, you know, and you're like, fuck, dude. It's 3 months long. It's 12 weeks.
Exactly.
Just that.
Yeah.
And it's very strict. Obviously, it's very by the number. You know, because sometimes you're like, I don't know. I couldn't understand. My buddies have been drill instructors, and obviously they get breaks, but I was like, the rest of the Marine Corps cannot be like this. You know what I mean? Like the regulation, like to the T. Yeah. I was like, you can't live like this for 4 years. Yeah, you know, it's like impossible.
Well, you know, and that's what's funny too is that a lot of people think that's what the Army is going to be like. Yeah, exactly. You know, and it's not. You know. So yeah, I mean, it was a big moment. You know, it was huge. You know, and it's a tradition that's been passed down. You know, that at the end of RAS now, it's called RAS 1 now, and you know, you do your donning ceremony. You spend all week. Also, one of the things you're doing all week too is shaping your beret, and it's the first time like the RIP cadre, like, all right, gather around, like, you know, story time, basically, you know, and they're like, we're going to teach you how to do this, you know, and they're not yelling, they're not screaming, nothing, and they're showing you how to do something with your hands. Also telling stories and talking about why it's so important to do it and why we do it, you know, in not a classroom way, in a personal way. I just remember that being like, you know, the RIP cadre, and I don't remember who it was, like, you know, as he's talking about the beret and like what it means to him, and he's reflecting on when he was a RIP, you know, cadet, you know, what that felt like to him. And I'm just like, dude, this fucking dude, man, like this means the world to him. Like this needs to mean then therefore it needs to mean the world to me too. You know, I look up to this guy. So this needs to be the world to me as well. And, you know, it's not that the uniform or anything that I'd done so far hadn't meant a lot to me, but that it was very, very impactful to me. And, so graduated, found out I was going up to Washington State, you know, and I was so stoked. 1, because it was close to Montana. 2, I'd always wanted to go out to Washington. And 3, I just didn't want to stay in fucking Georgia. You know, I just did not want to stay in Georgia. And went up there with one of my buddies as well, Graham Ferris. And, you know, so we were just stoked, elated, you know, to be going up there together. We kind of hit it off, you know, so we were pretty close. And, you know, got up there. And
so that's when you truly then, because I don't know like a ton about like the Marine Corps, or sorry, the Army pipeline. So it is when you get done with RIP. Yeah, it's gonna sound stupid to everybody. It's probably heard these podcasts before. And like even I'm like, I have a bunch of friends that are Rangers, but it's like, so that RIP, then they're like, you're cutting orders to the Ranger Battalion. Like you are now officially, because sometimes they do that weird thing. The Marine Corps is like this, like, well, you go into the platoon and then we'll see where things go. No. You know, it's like, no, you're cutting orders and you are now heading.
If you meet all of the standards, and you pass everything, and you do the donning ceremony, you're going to a battalion. There is no holdover. Yeah, there's the guys that get, you know, screwed over, and they're like, hey, you're going to go be this guy's driver for like a year or something, you know, but that doesn't happen really, and it doesn't happen very often. You're going to a Ranger platoon. And